The tomb of Dudu or Tutu in the collection of the 1,000 tombs of El Amarna belongs to a high official who worked for King Akhenaton during his reign in Egypt. This person was not beyond the level of suspicion. In matter of fact, his name was written twice in the tablets written by Aziro, warning King Akhenaton from him. King Akhenaton at that time was very much distracted by his new religion called Aton, so he did not pay any attention to the poison of this person called Tutu. The tomb of Tutu raises speculations and questions about his identity and true name. For there was a man called Dodo mentioned in the letters exchanged between Akhenaton and Aziro, who puts him in a questioning and suspicious position concerning the degree of his loyalty to his master, King Akhenaton, due to his unloyal actions. The facade of the tomb was well cut out in the rocks and was prepared with two mastabas on the two sides of the entrance. Taking into consideration the nature of the rocks, it's good that it kept its original plan of construction and neat carving. The whole of the tomb was supported by 12 columns cut out in the same rock. Only 8 remains today, for during the construction of mosques in a much later period, columns were removed and reused inside the mosques in the city. There are elements of constructions here that are quite unique and seen only in temples. For there are screen walls joining between the columns, which are usually used in temples to allow light to pass through their upper part and illuminate the temple. But here, they seem to support the columns and add a touch of uniqueness to the tomb. There are side chambers in the tomb to store all the funerary furniture needed for the afterlife of the deceased. The columns represent a bunch of papyrus flowers with closed buds, each tied together with a band below the capital. In the center, the statue chamber is located, with steps cut out in stone, ending by a place prepared for the statue of Tutu, again a feature of temples. Above the door, there is a sill that takes the shape of temple's door sill. It's wonderful to see the ceiling, in its good condition, blends with the columns and the ground, being all cut out in the same rock, and is very well preserved till today, taking into consideration that the tomb is 3,300 years old. Apophis is one of the gods of the netherworld and represents the evil serpent that faces God Ra in his journey and faces the deceased too, and thus he should be terminated. Usually, he appears with the arrow of the deceased sunk into his neck. About naming the snake Apophis or Abobis, It's a Greek name, taking after the Egyptian name Abeb, and the name is derived from the verb api, which is a verb that appears since the Pyramids texts and gives the meaning of to penetrate or to fly or to cross. According to what came in the different religious texts, the snake Apophis existed since eternity, since the beginning of the creation of the world, for he represents the evilness and the unbalance of the universe. His defeat and expel for the first time was by the Creator God in his various images. Therefore, he became the most vicious enemy of the sun god and intersects and opposes his daily journey in the sky. Accordingly, he was described in the texts as the destroyed. It's a reflection of his being destroyed and terminated every day. He's an older image of Satan, who was expelled from heaven by God and revenged by trying to harm and destroy humans. Abeb or Apophis is the embodiment of the hostile forces that stalk the sun god and the journey of his boat in the sky of the netherworld. Apophis, the snake, attacks the bark of Ra and therefore threatens the world's order in general. The crew of the boat of the sun god, who are headed by God Set, defeats this attacker after fighting him and eventually having victory over him. This struggle is repeated in the daily journey of the sun boat. Egypt was known since the ancient times with magic. It was widespread and had a great and important power, for it was practiced amongst all levels of the society. Magic was highly connected with the beliefs of the ancient Egyptians and their religious thinking, for they mixed it with their deities and considered it from the power and authority of the gods. The great magicians occupied high positions among the priests. The gods used magic in the struggles between them and each other, like Horus and Set. Greeks spoke highly of the knowledge of the Egyptians of magic, and the magicians of Egypt were mentioned in the story of Moses in Quran. The mention of the miracle of the stick is a decisive proof of how good the Egyptians were in magic, for it was habitual for the messengers and prophets to be sent with miracles in things which their people excelled at. It was clear how the magical rituals and the telling of the spells were connected with the reciting priest Hari-Hotep. This priest was the first tutor in the business of magic and charm. He had practiced the task of expelling evil spirits, and in the same time he treated ill cases like the fever and the bite of snakes and scorpions and other difficult diseases. Magic was fulfilled by telling spells and by using amulets. Magic consisted of an essence that was subject to its purpose and not to its essence. There were many purposes of magic in ancient Egypt, for in the normal life, the protective magic was practiced to expel evil spirits and to stop the dangers of predator animals, in addition of the desire to terminate the diseases and avoid envious eyes. This protective magic was the most common one and depends on the rules of good magic, which systems were placed since antiquity. The Egyptian magic is a science derived from books, for the magician used special books of magical spells that are fit to each case and recites these spells by himself. That's what's known as the oral rituals. Usually, these spells that are told are followed by tasks and things that were ought to be done, which are the practical rituals. For the magic to achieve its effect, some religious spells were recited, or the person carries some amulets that take the shape of protective deities, so that they could achieve the protection purpose, or some amulets took the form of sacred symbols. The ancient Egyptian wanted to have all what's useful by wearing these amulets or read spells and write on the amulet some of the prayers. These means gave magical powers and expelled all what's harmful to the person who carries them. They also brought good luck, in addition to speeding up the healing. Magic in ancient Egypt was connected with medicine and healing. In spite of the excel and care of the ancient Egyptian in medicine, he saw that each disease had outer symptoms that could be cured with medicines and inner hidden causes that could be a result of counter effect of invisible forces or evil spirits. That's how medicine and magic mixed together for the ancient Egyptians. The magicians in ancient Egypt were known with Her-U-Teb title. This may have a connection with the title of Gheri Hebit, or the one who performs rituals, from which came the translation of the reciting priest. The magicians carry the title of Her-U-Teb in the New Kingdom era, while they carry the title of the writers of the scripts of the god since the late period. When the famous king Akhenaten realized that he can no longer live in Thebes after calling for his new religion to worship one god, he had to choose a new place, which is here, Amarna in Elminia Governorate. He chose it to come in here with his followers to worship his new god, God Aton. These are the ruins of the northern palace of El Amarna. It may belong to his daughter Merit Aton, or it could belong to Queen Nefertiti. It is composed of a very big reception hall, a swimming pool, a stable for horses, and many chambers as well. And it is very well preserved, as you can see yourself. The history of religion in ancient Egypt before the time of King Akhenaten, and that's prior to the 14th century BC, was based on the numerosity of deities. Gods and goddesses were worshipped side by side across the whole country, each in his or her favorite city, with a main dominant god over them all, which was the sun god Amun. Then came Akhenaten with his new creed, calling for the unification of deities and concentrating the whole cult into one god only. That was God Aton. The word Aton wasn't new for the ancient Egyptian, for it actually meant the sun disk. It was mentioned in the story of Sinuhe, which is remarkable in the Egyptian ancient literature. Senohi said in his talk about the king of his time, he rose up to his horizon and became united with the sun disk Aton. Going back to older periods, the word Aton was referred to in the segment 334 of the Coffin's texts to mean the sun disk, and thus is concerned the first reference in the old texts to the existence of a sun disk between two horns. The sun disk here was connected to goddess Bat, who preceded the existence of Hathor. Atonism itself existed before the time of Akhenaton, for there is a palette from the time of King Amasis I that reads, "He ruled when Aton surrounded the world. The king can see as Ra when he rises like Aton, and like Kheperi in his eyes, and his rays are like the faces of Aton in the western skies." It's notable that Aton in this text did not have the ideogram of a god, and thus may be a proof that until that time he was not identified as a god. Atonism thrived in the time of King Amun-Hotep III, father of Akhenaton, for he was relieved on a stone block worshipping Aton, who was pictured in the form of a human, topped by a sun disk, which is a symbol of God Aton. So we have with us the artist Shireen Gerges, who contributed today in the exhibition of art of Forever Is Now. Hello, Shireen.
Hi, thank you for coming.
Thanks a lot. Please introduce yourself.
My name is Shireen Gerges, and behind me is a sculpture that site-specific sculpture that I created for the exhibition, and the sculpture is titled "Here I Have Returned."
So what do you want to reflect or express by your piece of art?
My sculpture is designed based on the design of an ancient pharaonic sistrum. And that's a musical instrument that...
Goddess Hathor.
Yes, of Goddess Hathor, bravo. And the sistrum was used to worship her. And also, if you notice in the Book of the Dead, often Isis is represented holding the sistrum. Sistrum is a very small, intimate instrument, and it was one of the only instruments allowed inside the deep parts of the sacred parts of the temple. So because I was here at the site of our, and our ancestral site, I wanted to make sure that I'm in conversation with that history in a respectful way and in a dialogue. And I particularly was interested in the way that Egyptian women over time have integrated their work, their labor.
Status?
Their labor. Their labor is often invisible. So I was really interested in being in dialogue with that. So we come to see the Khufu, Khafra, Mankara. But there's also 6 Queen's pyramids here. So these are 3 of them. And I wanted to lay the sistrum down in a way, so abstract the shape of it and lay it down so that it focuses the eye on the Queen's pyramids.
Shireen Gerges is an Egyptian artist who audits the symphony of difference and the complexity present in the politics of place. Using sight, text, and recovered histories at the core of each series, she develops projects that engage audiences in a dialogue between power and agency and social transformation through art. Her research-based practice is a means to heighten the understanding of magnified and contested histories, in particular those of women. The work engages both formal and social concerns. She named her piece in the exhibition, "Here I Have Returned."